Russia is burning, not metaphorically, literally. And what is doing the burning is not a cruise missile, not a ballistic warhead, not a Western-supplied standoff weapon. It is a drone, a heavy multi-rotor drone, the kind Russian soldiers have been calling Baba Yaga for 3 years now, after the witch in Slavic folklore who flies through the night and brings ruin. Only now she is not hovering 5 kilometers behind the front line, dropping mortar shells on a trench. She is striking 150 kilometers deep inside Russian territory, hitting helicopters sitting on a field airstrip in Voronezh Oblast, and the air defense network that was supposed to make that kind of operation impossible did not fire a single interceptor. Let that sink in for a moment. A drone that began its life as a modified agricultural octocopter costing somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000 just reached past every layer of Russian air defense and struck military aviation assets worth $15 million each. And the response from Moscow was not a tactical adjustment, it was a leadership purge. On May 4th, Vladimir Putin replaced the commander of Russia's entire aerospace forces, General Viktor Avsalov, with Colonel General Alexander Chaiko. That is not the action of a military that has the problem contained. That is the action of a military that has lost confidence in the system itself. This is not a story about one drone strike. This is a case study in how an entire air defense architecture collapses from the inside out, and why everything Russia assumed about depth, distance, and protection has already failed. Pull the lens back to understand why a Baba Yaga flying 150 kilometers into Russia represents a structural turning point rather than a lucky hit. You have to understand what Russia believed about its own air defense, and why that belief was always built on a decaying foundation. For decades, Russia marketed itself and to the world as the premier integrated air defense power on Earth. The doctrine was layered defense in depth. S-400 systems provided the long-range umbrella. S-300 variants covered the medium ring. Buck and Tor batteries handled the short and medium-range intercept zone. Pantsir systems were supposed to be the final close-in shield, catching anything that leaked through the upper layers. And behind all of it sat an array of radars, the Nebo-U, the Kasta, the Imbir from the S-300V system, scanning at different altitudes, different frequencies, feeding a unified picture into command posts that were supposed to see everything and respond instantly. That was the theory. The theory assumed that Russia would always be fighting enemies who sent fast, expensive, detectable objects through its airspace. Jets, cruise missiles, ballistic warheads, objects that fly at high altitude, emit strong radar signatures, and behave in predictable kinematic profiles that layered defense is designed to solve. What the theory did not account for, what it structurally could not account for, was an adversary that would send slow, cheap, low-altitude, thermally quiet platforms in volume at night using terrain masking and constantly evolving electronic warfare countermeasures, and that those platforms would be aimed not at defended targets behind the shield, but at the shield itself. That is the adaptation asymmetry this war has exposed. Russia built an air defense system to protect against the kind of enemy it expected. Ukraine became the kind of enemy Russia never modeled, and it gets even more serious from here. Because Ukraine did not stumble into this advantage. Ukraine engineered it deliberately, systematically, over months. And the timeline tells you everything you need to know about how far behind Moscow really is. Go back to early 2022. The Baba Yaga class of drones, the R-18 from Aerorozvidka, the early Kazan from Reactive Drone, the Vampire from Skyfall, were battlefield improvisations. They carried about 5 to 11 kilograms of payload. Their operational radius was 3 to 5 kilometers. Crews had to drive out on quad bikes, get dangerously close to Russian positions, launch the drone, drop repurposed RPG warheads, and hope the first bomb hit. The aiming was manual. The guidance was basic. The survival rate per airframe was unpredictable, but they worked. At the Battle of Kyiv, those early Baba Yagas destroyed dozens of armored vehicles. They proved a concept that every subsequent month has only expanded. A cheap, reusable, heavy-lift multi-rotor drone operated at night with thermal cameras can deliver precision munitions against targets that conventional artillery cannot reach without exposing the firing unit. That concept was the seed. What grew from it is an entirely different weapon system. By late 2024 and into 2025, the Kazan series alone had evolved through multiple generations. Payload capacity jumped from 5 kilograms to 30, and in certain configurations up to 70 kilograms, with reports of a 150 kilogram payload variant now in development. Operational radius expanded from 5 kilometers to 15 to 25, and for one-way deep strike missions, significantly further. The aiming system went from manual drop and adjust to AI-assisted precision targeting, where the operator locks crosshairs on a target and the onboard system calculates speed, altitude, and windage, releasing the munition at exactly the right moment. The communications architecture went from a single radio link to a triple redundant system running encrypted digital radio, Starlink satellite terminal, and LTE cellular connectivity simultaneously. If one channel is jammed, the others hold. The flight control software became self-healing. A Kazan hexacopter can lose 2 of its 6 motors and continue flying. Small arms fire has minimal effect. Even a direct hit from a single FPV interceptor may not bring one down. And the cost, $20,000 to $40,000 per airframe. Each drone typically survives around 100 flights. The munitions are often repurposed Soviet-era mortar bombs at $30 each, or TM-62 anti-tank mines at $600. You could buy 1,000 Kazans for the price of one MQ-9 Reaper. That is not an incremental cost advantage. That is a different economic universe. But the real question is not what Baba Yaga can carry or how far it can fly. The real question is what Ukraine decided to aim it at, and the answer changes the entire architecture of this war. What happens next changes everything. In February 2025, the Financial Times confirmed that Ukraine's drone kill zone, the area behind the front line where Ukrainian systems could reliably strike Russian troops, vehicles, and logistics, extended roughly 15 kilometers. That was already significant. 15 kilometers meant that Russian supply trucks, ammunition depots, and command posts just behind the contact line were no longer safe. By March 2026, the Telegraph reported that the kill zone had expanded to 150 kilometers, not 15, 150. That is a tenfold expansion of contested depth in barely a year. And it did not happen because Ukraine simply built more drones. It happened because Ukraine executed a deliberate sequence campaign to destroy the Russian systems that were preventing deeper penetration. Here's the logic, and it is devastatingly elegant. The first phase used heavy bomber drones, the Baba Yaga class, to target Russian electronic warfare units and air defense radars, the Costa radars that detect low-altitude drones, the Zetel electronic warfare stations that jam control frequencies, the Buk batteries, the Pantsir close-in defense systems, the Tor interceptors, every layer of the shield that was supposed to stop exactly these kinds of platforms. In March 2026 alone, Ukraine's unmanned systems forces destroyed 41 Russian air defense components. That is not a number I am using for dramatic effect. That is the figure published by the SBS commander Robert Brovdi, the officer known by his call sign Madyar, 41 components in a single month. And the composition of those losses tells the real story. On a single night, March 6th, Ukrainian drone crews destroyed a Buk surface-to-air missile system in Kherson Oblast, an S-300V launcher in Zaporizhzhia Oblast, a Pantsir S-1 in Zaporizhzhia, and a Tor M1 in the same region. Every tier of the layered defense, short range, medium range, long range, all struck with Ukrainian-made FP2 fixed-wing kamikaze drones carrying 60 to 100 kilogram warheads. Brovdi called it an air defense zoo. That was one night. The campaign continued for weeks. By mid-March, the destruction had reached Russia's most sophisticated radar systems. A 64N6 Nadgroby radar, a part of the S-300 and S-400 architecture capable of detecting targets at hundreds of kilometers under heavy electronic countermeasures, was destroyed along with a Buk M2 transporter loader. In Crimea, multiple Nebo-U long-range surveillance radars, each valued at approximately $100 million, were struck and degraded. A Costa radar was eliminated. An Imbir radar from the S-300V system, a rare precision manufactured ballistic target detection system costing $10 to $20 million with total production believed to number only a few hundred units, was destroyed. And here's the detail that tells you Russia understood what was happening but could not stop it. By March 16th, Russian forces had begun deploying decoy radar installations, mock-ups, fake systems placed in Donetsk Oblast to try to draw Ukrainian strikes away from real assets. When a military starts building decoys of its own air defense, it has conceded that it cannot protect the real systems. That is not adaptation. That is institutional panic wearing a camouflage net. The broader lesson here is not about individual system kills. It is about cascade failure. Each destroyed radar reduces the detection envelope for the next sector. Each eliminated Buk or Tor battery opens a corridor that lighter, cheaper FPV drones can now fly through without being intercepted or jammed. Each degraded electronic warfare station means Ukrainian communications links hold longer at greater range. The destruction compounds, and it compounds in one direction. A Japanese defense researcher tracked the data and documented a net loss of 322 Russian air defense components through this period, a reduction of 35% of the 908 components he was monitoring. Over a third of Russia's tracked air defense network degraded or destroyed, and the systems being lost, the S-300V launchers, the Panzer batteries, the Buk M3 units, are not items that can be rushed off a production line. These are precision manufactured high-technology platforms that take years to build and require components that Russia is increasingly unable to source under sanctions. Dmytro Zluktenko, a soldier and analyst with Ukraine's 413th Unmanned Systems Regiment, put it plainly. Russia is losing crazy amounts of rare air defense systems, radars, and there is no way to quickly replenish them. Russian war bloggers confirmed it from their own side. One wrote, "The enemy has once again taken control of the lower sky. The situation is difficult." And it gets even more serious from here, because the destruction of the air defense network is not the end state. It is the enabling condition for what comes next. On April 22nd, Ukraine's newly formalized Deep Strike Center, a coordination unit within the unmanned systems forces built specifically to plan and execute long-range drone operations, directed 8 FP2 precision drones against an FSB command post in occupied Donetsk. 12 Russian officers were killed, 15 were wounded. The targeted unit was involved in sabotage, intelligence gathering, and coordination of subversive activities in Ukrainian-controlled territory. That strike was not a frontline engagement. It was a surgical deep operation against a high-value intelligence node carried out with drones, coordinated through a purpose-built command architecture that did not exist 12 months earlier. 1 week later, on April 29th, the strike that defines this moment, Ukrainian drone crews from the 429th Achilles Separate Regiment and the 43rd Unit, coordinated with a special operations element, hit 2 Russian helicopters at a field airstrip in Voronezh Oblast. An Mi-28 attack helicopter, NATO designation Havoc, valued at approximately $15 million, and an Mi-17 transport helicopter, similarly valued. The airstrip was 150 kilometers from the front line. The helicopters had paused for refueling and a technical check. The drones hit the rear central sections of the engine compartments, deliberately avoiding the main rotor blades, a level of precision that speaks to operator skill and targeting system maturity that should alarm every Russian aviation planner on this front. At least 1 maintenance crew member was killed, but the material loss is not the real cost. The real cost is positional. If Russian helicopters are not safe at field airstrips 150 kilometers behind the line of contact, then the entire concept of rear area aviation staging is compromised. Helicopters that cannot safely refuel cannot sustain sortie rates. Attack helicopters that cannot loiter near the front cannot provide close air support to ground forces. The entire kill chain that depends on rotary wing aviation, reconnaissance, fire support, casualty evacuation, rapid resupply, degrades, not because the helicopters were shot down in combat, but because the ground they were standing on was no longer beyond reach. And that is the moment when the Baba Yaga drone crossed from being a tactical weapon to being a strategic instrument. Now, pull the lens even further back because the command response from Moscow tells you everything about the institutional depth of this failure. 5 days after the Voronezh helicopter strike on May 4th, Putin replaced General Viktor Avsalov as commander of Russia's aerospace forces. Avsalov had held the position since 2023 when he replaced Sergei Surovikin. His replacement, Colonel General Alexander Chaiko, previously commanded Russian forces in Syria and led the Eastern Military District. The European Union sanctioned Chaiko in March 2026, citing his command of the force implicated in the mass killings at Bucha. This is not a man chosen for reform. This is a man chosen for political loyalty in a crisis. The timing is unmistakable. In late March, Ukrainian drone strikes hit Russia's largest oil ports on the Baltic Sea, halting exports. In April, oil facilities inside Russia came under more than 20 separate attacks. At least 9 refineries were hit, and 5 halted production entirely. On May 4th itself, the night of Avsalov's dismissal, an explosion was heard in Moscow during a drone attack. A drone reportedly struck a high-rise apartment building near Mosfilmovskaya Street. This was 5 days before the May 9th Victory Day parade, Russia's most symbolically important military display. The parade went ahead, but without military equipment, only a marching column, reduced guest list, duration under an hour. President Zelensky publicly stated that Ukrainian drones could appear over Red Square during the ceremony. He said Russia is no longer as powerful as it used to be. When a nation's most important military celebration is stripped of its armor, its aircraft, and its public confidence, you are not looking at a country that has an air defense problem. You are looking at a country that has a credibility problem. And credibility in the context of deterrence and alliance management is the only thing that holds Russia's strategic position together. The question most analysts are still underweighting is what happens when Ukraine's Deep Strike Command Center reaches full operational tempo. Major Olha Meloshina, spokesperson for the Unmanned Systems Forces, confirmed that additional units and trained pilots are set to join from May, increasing the tempo of strikes that already exceed 100,000 drone sorties per month. Firepoint, Ukraine's top long-range strike drone manufacturer, is producing roughly 200 deep strike UAVs per day. The FP2 system that destroyed the FSB command post and the Buk batteries has a range of 200 kilometers and carries warheads up to 105 kilograms. It uses an FPV-style interface for first-person terminal guidance, and the Baba Yaga platforms themselves continue to evolve. The latest Kazan variants carry AI-assisted targeting, triple redundant communications, self-healing flight control software, and payloads large enough to destroy bunkers. They are now armed with machine guns in addition to bomb release systems. Footage from May 2nd shows a Baba Yaga engaging Russian infantry near Huliaipol with both direct fire and aerial munitions simultaneously. These are no longer improvised agricultural drones with grenades strapped underneath. These are integrated strike platforms operating within a coordinated command architecture, systematically dismantling the layered defense that was supposed to make deep strikes impossible. Russia, by contrast, has acknowledged it is falling behind Ukraine in heavy combat drone development. Moscow has begun trying to field its own heavy bomber drones, knockoff copies of the Vampire hexacopter, but Ukraine's 81st Brigade has already shot down 5 of them. Russia even operates captured Ukrainian Baba Yagas, which tells you how far behind indigenous production remains. The response on the ground has been to strip multi-barrel machine guns from old Soviet attack helicopters and bolt them onto trucks to shoot at drones. That is not an air defense strategy. That is a sign of system collapse improvised into theater. History will record that in the spring of 2026, a drone that cost less than a mid-range sedan reached deeper into Russian territory than any weapon Ukraine had previously deployed at scale, struck military aviation assets that cost hundreds of times more, and did so through an air defense network that Russia had spent decades and billions of dollars constructing. It will record that the response was not a technological countermeasure, but a leadership reshuffle. It will record that the kill zone expanded from 15 kilometers to 150 in barely a year. And it will record that the system enabling this, the Unmanned Systems Forces, the Deep Strike Command Center, the Baba Yaga bomber companies, the FP-2 middle strike fleet, was not a single innovation, but a doctrine built under fire, refined through constant battlefield feedback, and scaled faster than Russia's industrial base could replenish what was being destroyed. The deeper question now is not whether Ukraine can sustain this campaign, it is whether Russia can survive it. Every Buk battery lost opens a corridor. Every Panzer destroyed extends the reach. Every radar eliminated blinds a sector. And every month, Ukraine adds more pilots, more airframes, more coordination depth, and more institutional knowledge about how to find and kill the systems Russia cannot replace. By the end of this year, Russia's ability to sustain offensive operations anywhere along the Eastern Front may depend almost entirely on what it can move on foot at night through territory that Ukrainian drones are already watching. That is not a prediction. That is the trajectory the evidence already describes. And the trajectory does not bend in Moscow's favor. Stay with us, because what comes next in this campaign will not simplify. It will escalate, and the answers will matter far beyond Ukraine